apologizing because it was late at the time we started 10:30, but we are 30 minutes late. We do respect your time and we would like to apologize for that. I think we won't waste any time. I would like to welcome you to this presser. This presser happens after major announcements by the US government in relation to the trade relations with South Africa and other countries. South Africa wishes to take this time to reflect on the major announcement that will happen and delivered by the President of US, Dr. Donald Trump. Now, how we're going to do the conference is that Minister Ronald Lamola is going to give us a major reflection, and then Minister Pakster will then be available to respond to issues relating to trade relations, and we should be able to answer some of the questions of the consent. So on my right hand side is the DDG for Trade, DDG Kolelwa Milumbi Peters, next to Minister Pakster, Trade, Industry and Competition. The last minister next to me becomes Minister Ronald Lamola. Thanks. Minister Lamola, I'm going to hand over to you to begin our presser to give us the reflections. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Yamgelo, and Minister Tau, and to all members of the media who are here present. The new tariff regime arising from the decision by the United States of America, which have been directed not only to South Africa but to the entire world, necessitates strategic responses to maintain and grow our industrial base as a crucial avenue to pursue inclusive growth. In response to the US government's imposition of tariffs, South Africa will continue to navigate the challenges and opportunities these measures present with resilience and innovation. Guided by its national interests and aligned with its broader trade and industrial policy, South Africa is committed to ensuring economic growth, industrial development, and the well-being of its citizens. South Africa intends to negotiate favorable agreements. South Africa will work to secure opportunities in context of rapid withdrawal of favorable arrangements, giving our exports preferential access to the United States of America. This might involve securing additional exemptions and favorable quota agreements, ensuring our industries maintain critical access to the US markets, including through sectoral cooperation. This aligns with the national interest of promoting economic prosperity and safeguarding the livelihoods of South Africans. Diversity and expand trade relations. Efforts will intensify to diversify export destinations, targeting markets across Africa, as well as in Asia, Europe, Middle East, and the Americas. Moreover, such efforts will also, where deemed appropriate, involve bilateral arrangements where these allow for the pursuance of our national interests. In our presidency of the G20, as the recent engagements at the G20 Trade and Investment Working Group indicate, the issue of supply chain geographic diversification is a challenge confronting all open markets economies across the globe. This diversification supports South Africa's industrial strategy and reduces the dependence on single destinations markets for our exports or single sources for intermediate input requirements, fostering resilience in line with national economic priorities. South Africa will leverage the Africa Continental Free Trade Area to bolster intra-Africa trade, fostering stronger regional economic integration and cooperation. This approach aligns with the national interest of contributing to a better Africa and a better world. Focus on value-added production. Industries will prioritize transforming raw materials into high-value finished goods, reducing tariff exposure and driving innovation to improve profitability. This supports South Africa's industrial policy objectives of boosting local manufacturing and creating jobs. Stimulate domestic growth. The government will invest strategically in industries impacted by the tariffs, supporting economic growth through modernization and targeted infrastructure development. These align with the national interest of ensuring the well-being of South Africans. Forge global alliances. South Africa will continue to build strategic partnerships with other nations, enhancing collaborations and our influence in the international trade negotiations. This reflects the national interest of strengthening global diplomatic and economic ties. South Africa's tariffs and industrial strategy are designed to support industrial development, employment growth, and economic resilience. By aligning these policies with the national interest, South Africa will ensure that its economy emerges stronger, more diversified, and resilient in the face of global trade complexities. This approach will also apply to the 7 February executive orders, which is currently being attended to by interdepartmental teams, which includes all the departments that are affected by the executive orders. And you know most of them: higher education, basic education, defense, health, transport, and many departments. The 31% tariffs implemented by the US administration will be effective from the 9th of April 2025. South Africa's average tariff is 7.6%, and therefore South Africa needs clarity on the basis for the 31% to be implemented by the US. It is important to note that products such as copper, pharmaceutical, semiconductors, lumber articles, certain critical minerals, and energy products have been exempted from the reciprocal tariffs. Some of these materials are already key parts of the United States of America sourcing requirements. According to the United States Geological Survey, 97% of their chrome ore requirements come from South Africa. 6% of fluorspar import requirements, and 24% of the United States manganese requirements. These reciprocal tariffs will not apply to products already facing Section 232 tariffs of the 25%, such as steel, aluminium, automobiles, and auto parts. The reciprocal tariffs effectively nullify the preference that sub-Saharan Africa countries enjoy under the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, well known as AGOA. The sweeping tariffs measures will affect several sectors of our economy, including automotive industry, agriculture, processed food and beverage, chemical, metals, and other segments of manufacturing, with implications for job and growth. The US represented 7.45% of South Africa's total exports in 2024, while South Africa accounted for only 0.4% of US total imports. South Africa does not constitute a threat to US, and where there is a trade imbalance in favor of South Africa, it is mainly on agricultural products, which are counter-cyclical, and minerals, which are inputs in US industries. South Africa will continue building domestic supply resilience, reducing cost of doing business, and increasing competitiveness of our economy. Further, South Africa will continue with efforts to diversify export markets as part of its resilience building strategy. The significant market access opportunities, both through trade agreements and through strategic partnerships with countries across the globe, present huge opportunities for our exports. The recently concluded Africa Continental Free Trade Area remains untapped beyond the Southern African Development Community. Furthermore, South Africa enjoys preferential market access through the South African Customs Union, SADC-AU Economic Partnership Agreement, SACU plus Mozambique and UK EPA, the European Free Trade Associations, MERCOSUR that includes Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, and the Japan Generalized Systems of Preferences. In addition, government is strengthening relations with countries in Asia and the Middle East to open new market access opportunities. Some of these efforts are bearing fruits with new market access opportunities for agricultural products. To reiterate, the presidencies, while South Africa remains committed to a mutually beneficial trade relationships with the United States, unilaterally imposed and punitive tariffs are a concern and serve as a barrier of trade and short prosperity. The tariffs affirm the agency to negotiate a new bilateral and mutually beneficial agreement with the US that will establish a more fair trade relations with the US as an essential step to secure long term trade certainty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Colleagues, I'm about to then engage with you now. I think just want to put one thing clear. Before you speak, you need to press your mic. It must be red for us to hear you. So what I will require from you is that I'm going to need you to mention the media house you're coming from, and I will then give you a number. So you will mention your name and say name, the media house you are coming from, and then you'll have a number, and then we'll then go in that order. I would like you to raise your hands for us to go for questions. Thanks. Number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. Oh, number 5, number 6. Let's take that round of 6 people. Thanks. Number 1, let's go. Let's try dynamism and look for the closest that can work. Are they all not working? Oh, stop.
16. Perfect. This is Mobile Shumja from Reuters. Minister, you said that so the reciprocal tariffs effectively nullify the preferences that sub-Saharan African countries enjoy under AGOA. So just clarity then. So with the other products that are exempted from these tariffs, so do they still form part of AGOA then, or essentially no other product now falls under AGOA, and then what remains of AGOA? So it's just a shell that remains now, or what exactly? So just clarity on that. And has the US explicitly said that that's it, no more AGOA, or what?
Number 2.
Hi, this is Judy Brown for AFP agency. First of all, will South Africa apply tariffs back to the US in response to these tariffs? And about AGOA, is it legal for the US to apply tariffs on South Africa and sub-Saharan countries where AGOA was still in effect until September?
Number 3.
Good morning, I'm from Eyewitness News. Just the first one, obviously you said, and I think this has been spoken about since the US President Donald Trump came back into office, the idea of re-emphasizing regional trade ties here in Africa. Can you speak to us about where we are with that and what some of the barriers are in terms of creating a common African market? And just additionally to that, the issue of cross-border payments, where are we with reforming the infrastructure so that it's easier to do trade in Africa? And then the second one, Mr. Dow, you had a statement earlier this week speaking about meeting with trade officials in the US to discuss. At the time, it was just the tariffs, the 25% tariffs on the automobile sector, but now we've got these additional tariffs. Can we get a sense of when that meeting is set to take place? Thank you.
My number 4.
Oh, sorry, that's me.
Okay.
Sorry. Diane Hawker from Geopolitical. So the minister mentioned that South Africa's average tariff is 7.6%, which is very different to the information that was provided by the US President when he was presenting his tariffs. When South Africa takes a look at those calculations, are you able to make sense at how the US government came to the numbers that it did in applying 30% tariff to South Africa? And then the second question, I think for Minister Dow, obviously the agricultural industry will be quite affected by these tariffs. Some farming communities, like the community of Citrus Dow, primarily exports to the US. How does the government see itself supporting those communities in the short term while continuing these conversations with the US?
Hi, good day. It's Kylie Shakumari here from SABC News. Maybe just to get from the ministers, have you been in touch with your counterparts, just in terms of the responses, how they're dealing with this very unprecedented times? And maybe just as a second question, South Africa under the G20 presidency, you have been calling for the reforms of the financial institutions, your WTO and many others. Do you think they can play a role at this particular point in time, given the very massive impact, the job creation across the world? Thank you.
My number 6, the last number.
Good morning, Daniel Tokwana from Bloomberg News. Minister, you just confirmed that the US reciprocal tariffs nullify AGOA benefits. Is that effective immediately, or are you waiting for the US to explicitly say? And also, is it South Africa's approach to impose its own reciprocal tariffs? Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I will call up Minister Parkstow to respond to some of the questions relating to his area of work.
Thank you very much and good morning. Just to also confirm that we're joined by the 2 Deputy Directors General, Ambassador Mlumbi Peter from DTIC and Ambassador Loma from International Relations, and to the extent that the DDGs would want to jump in on some of the specific issues, would welcome their contributions. Firstly, I think it is to confirm that the US has stated, in fact, our mission in Washington has confirmed that it's not 30%, it's 31%, and that there was an error on the side of the US. They have since confirmed that it is 31%, which is 50% discounted. And of course, the issue is where does the 62% come from if in fact actual tariffs are at 7.6%. Of course, everybody is doing a calculation and speculating on what could be included. The safest thing to do is to get confirmation from the US as to how they arrived at the number. Right now, we're speculating whether they've calculated balance of trade, whether they've calculated what they consider to be matters around public policy and the implications of public policy, and a whole range of considerations on the basis of the reports that were considered in Congress, but also on the basis of the statement they issued. So at this point, we're all speculating, but I think the safest would be to get confirmation from the US as to how they arrived at the number, and to clarify, in fact, how we are working on the number that historically we've been working on with the United States in relation to tariffs, which are transparent because they are calculated on the basis of international norms and standards, utilizing World Trade Organization standards with regards to calculating tariffs, particularly as you employ the most favored nations mechanism of calculating tariffs across the board. So we trade with the US, we trade with the rest of the world, utilizing the same platform. So in essence, we calculate it on the basis of it being 7.6%. But I'd rather not confirm what we are currently speculating. Let's get confirmation. The second issue is, does it nullify AGOA benefits? As you would know, AGOA is, it's legislation in the US that's reviewed annually. Excuse me. It's legislation in the US that is reviewed annually. And to the extent that the executive orders have essentially said that that legislation would not be applicable, in this instance, we work on the basis that it has nullified their core benefits. In particular categories, there are areas where there have been specific exclusions, and Minister Lamola indicated the areas of specific exclusion. It does also exclude areas such as auto, which is calculated on the basis of the across-the-board 25% increase in auto tariffs to the US. So that's covered in a different platform, which is on the automotive sector. Is it legal? I suppose it's US law. It's US law. It's on the basis of the United States' ability to utilize their own legislation. And I guess it is US courts that would determine whether these executive orders are legal. But at an international level, I think there is a general acknowledgement that there's been a disruption to the multilateral trading system. In reality, the systems of the World Trade Organization have not been considered in the application of the executive orders that were issued in relation to trade. Of course, it concerns us. Excuse me. Of course, it concerns us. We have been concerned about the World Trade Organization and its systems, in particular the dispute resolution systems and the application of dispute resolution mechanisms, but also overall compliance to World Trade Organization. And that's why we are advocating for a reform of the World Trade Organization and ensuring that it's able to adapt to current reality, but also ensuring that we're able to reinforce a multilateral system of trade and transparency across the board. Otherwise, you're going to have an environment where there are no global rules. It is the rules of the strongest that apply. And that on its own is going to significantly disrupt trading across the world. So we've been saying it before, the announcements on the 2nd of April, and the announcements that took place earlier that, in fact, there is a need for fundamental reform in the World Trade Organization. And we will be championing that at the G20 and our presidency of the G20. With regards to regional ties, excuse me, you'd know that the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement has been ratified. Those countries that have ratified the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement have started trading under the platform of the AfCFTA. We ourselves started trading under the platform in January last year. Recently at the AU Summit, additional elements of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, including digital trade and others, were adopted, meaning that it has been expanding. It's going to be about continuously expanding the platform on which we facilitate trade under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. The Pan-African Payment System has been established. It is an initiative that is led by the Secretariat of the AfCFTA. It has been established and different countries are beginning to adjust to the implementation of the Pan-African Payment System. Of course, it does require ratification by individual countries, and different countries are currently considering the processes of applying the Pan-African Payment System. We are looking at diversifying. We've long started the process of diversifying our trade partners, including in citrus. Talking WTO and citrus, you would know that we have ourselves declared a dispute with the EU with regards to citrus because of restrictions that we believe are unreasonable by the EU. We have continued to engage the US around citrus, and we've looked at alternative markets for our citrus growers, including in the East. An appetite has been expressed. In fact, when we did FOCAC last year, citrus was included in the products that would now be able to send into the Chinese market. So there are different markets that we continue to work on. And as indicated by Minister Lamola, continuously we have to ensure that we diversify and expand the people and countries with which we trade, but also the reality taking into account the global experiences around the disruption of supply chains during COVID. As a country, we've had to begin to think about how we diversify our own trade and supply chains. So it's work that we've been actively doing to ensure that we adapt to the new realities, and what has transpired now simply accelerates the work that we've already started. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I think for order, through your permission, Ministers, I will then take you, Minister Ronald, and then when I will then do is that later I will then ask the DDGs if they would like to chip in along the way. So, Minister Ronald.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think it's only one question related to ERCO, in particular whether are we in engagements with our other colleagues in terms of responding. Yes, we are exchanging notes with our colleagues. You will remember that during the G20 meetings that we had here, the key focus of our bilateral was that exchange of notes in terms of responding to these executive orders coming from the US, and we had lots of engagements with our colleagues from the UK, from Canada, from the European Union, from all the countries that were present, including the African countries, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Algeria, that were here in our country in terms of how can we build alliances, diversify our markets, build a strong economic basis that will enable our countries to stand these ongoing difficulties that arises out of the executive orders. And what Minister Tau speaks about on diversification and continuing to build on what is already there is in line with all these exchanges that we continue to have with our colleagues across the globe, and we will continue to build more in the East, Middle East, in the African continent, to be able to ensure that we leverage on the aspects that are coming out clearly on the Africa Free Trade Continental Area Agreement, and also in other parts of the world where we can be able to access markets, but not only markets, also issues of geopolitics where we can re-strengthen each other, solidarity, as you will have seen when we hosted the European Union summit in Cape Town. So we will continue with that work to continue to build on that, so that the globe and the people of the world can stand together in this difficult time that is emerging for everyone. It's not only for South Africa, it's for all countries across the globe. It's just different of varying degrees. And there is an understanding that the best response will be all of us working together, finding solutions together, and continuing to ensure that the trading platforms and also the geopolitical world continues to be what is anchored on multilateral platforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I would like to ask DDG Kolelo, do you have a bite? Are you good? DDG? Okay, good. Okay, what I'm going to do now is going to ask for a second and the last round. I'm told we're joined by some colleagues online. We'll probably have to give a chance to them first, then I will come back. Sis Pumzile, you're assisting me, no?
Yeah, we've got about 4 hands on the platform. So we'll take the first question from Vitaly. Victorine Makashet, if you can just please introduce yourself and your media house. Victorine, if you can just take the floor, introduce yourself and the media house you come from.
Okay, if they are delaying us, we're going to come back inside. Thanks. We're going to do the same way. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, 6, 7. Thanks. In that order.
Very good. You're coming again from Eyewitness News. Minister, I don't think you responded to 2 questions. The first, I think, was Lubando, who asked about imposing counter tariffs against the US, or are you waiting to first assess how the calculations would be like before you then respond with counter tariffs? And the second one was about a meeting with the US trade tariffs. And just to add to that one, I don't imagine you'd be able to convince them to remove any of the tariffs. They're global, and I don't think that's a likelihood. But what would your messaging in that meeting be, should it go ahead? And then, Mr. Lamola, one for you, please, on the review of the bilateral ties that was announced in a statement yesterday on Twitter by Congressman Ronnie. On that front, they mentioned in the statement imposing sanctions on, quote, corrupt South African government officials and allies, and South Africa's allies and so on. What's your response to that? Who are they speaking about in that sense? Who are these corrupt South African government officials? Do you know? Have you gotten any briefing on that front about that statement, particularly about imposing sanctions on corrupt South African government officials and some of our ties with other nations? Thank you.
My number 2.
And also from Newsroom Africa. If I could get a little bit more details into the strategic approach for the immediate term, because when we speak to industry players in the supply chain, the effects of what's happening around the tariffs will be felt almost immediately by industry, consumers and workers perhaps in 3 months. And it seems that the solutions we're coming up are more, medium to long term, but just a little bit more details into the strategic approach more immediately. And then unrelated question for Minister Lamola, the earthquake in Thailand. 11 South African citizens affected. Are there any citizens that are unaccounted for? And then final question back to Minister Dow. We are expecting trade ministers to be in the DRC in the next few weeks. Trade Minister of DRC also in South Africa over this weekend. Is it related conversations around AGOA and after that will be taking place there? Thank you.
My number 3.
Yeah. Paul from CCTV. Question to Minister Lamola. How is South Africa strategically adapting to its trade policies in response to the US tariffs? And what impact do you anticipate this will have on our diplomatic relations with the United States? And then another question for Minister Dau. In light of the new tariffs, how does South Africa plan to enhance its trade relations with other countries, including China, to ensure continued access to international markets, particularly under the African Growth Opportunity Act?
Number 4.
Diane Hawker from Deutsche Welle again. Question for Minister Lamola. We saw before these tariffs came out that South Africa's ambassador to the US was unceremoniously kicked out of the US. And the situation when it comes to South Africa and the US has had tension for the last few months. Now we have what many in industry would describe as a crisis for some industries. How is South Africa going to go about rebuilding the relationship with the US so that the approaches made by South Africa can be positively received?
Thank you. Number 5.
Sophie Nkuna from the SABC. Let me start with Minister Lamola. Minister Lamola, you had the DG going to Washington after engagements in New York with the UN. And yesterday the DG saying they met senior officials, both from the Vice President's office, Vance, and also from President Trump's office. And the discussions were cordial. From the technocrats, one would expect that it will be escalated, these engagements, to heads of different departments at political level, like the Secretary of State, Rubio, and yourself as the international minister in South Africa. Are we likely going to see such engagements at your level, and how would you characterize that meeting last week, the attitude? The second question is in relation to the tariffs. Clearly, it's not about South Africa, it's about the posture of the United States of America in trying to recapture its influence as a dominant force on trade matters. Because we can see even the friends of the US that we know have been affected. They are even found wanting. They don't know how to respond. Therefore, what is South Africa's position? What will be the message at different multilateral level in terms of what needs to be done going forward with the change of balance of forces? This has changed balance of forces, whether you talk trade or political influence. What will be your response? And then finally, South Sudan, the last time I spoke to you, you indicated that you will be discussing with relevant people like the president. What's the latest in relation to intervention or discussions with South Sudan, as South Africa is a guarantor of that peace agreement? Thanks so much.
Number 6. Number 6.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Doesn't have mic on.
That's fine. Can I speak like this?
It's off, mine.
Geopolitical for AP News Agency. I just wanted to re-emphasize the question of reciprocal tariffs that my colleague repeated, but also what are the concrete consequences going to be of these tariffs? Do you already know of factories that are probably going to have to close in the next few weeks or months? And do you have any estimation of the effects on the economic growth? I know that there were some models about the effects of ECO not being renewed. Yeah, if you have any idea what this will do to economic growth in South Africa.
Last number 7.
Calling again from Reuters, Mr. Tau is on the topic of retaliation. So a specific example here that was mentioned specifically on autos. Would you look to revoke the rebates that the US car companies enjoy under the Automotive Production Development Program?
Okay, thanks, colleagues. I'm assuming, madam, you are reading us from the online. Oh, you read so perfectly. I thought they sent you by email. Okay, thanks. Can you do us the online quickly?
Yes, no, some of them touch the questions, so I'll go with the questions that are mentioned there. The first question is from Ed from BBC, and he says, does South Africa plan to retaliate to the US tariffs, and so how? And what does this mean for AGOA? Will it be dismantled altogether? And then I've got a couple of questions from Terence Kremer, Engineering News. The first one, what are direct export losses to South Africa under the worst case scenario? Number 2, what are the likely indirect risks to the economy? Number 3, what actions will the DTIC take to protect local industry from the likelihood that there will now be too many products facing too few markets? And then the last question from Terence, what bilateral engagements are planned with the US and when? and what is the status of South Africa's bilateral trade offer?
Thank you, colleagues. That was our last round. This is what I'm going to do since we've established a way of working. Minister Parkstar will come in and respond to his question. I won't come back. Minister Lamola will come back, and then I'll then request the DDGs if there's something to add, and then we'll then go close. Thanks.
Thank you once again. One of the reasons we delayed our visit to the US was because we actually expected the announcements to be made on the 2nd of April. Because the US had already announced before that on the 2nd of April, they would be making announcements with regards to global trade and tariffs. And we thought that it is important that when the announcement is made, that we assimilate the information and respond, that we're able to understand a whole range of issues, which countries are affected, what is the policy direction that the US is taking, what are the strategic and tactical considerations, and then make a decision as to how we respond. Now, I'm saying this because there's almost an expectation that within 24 hours, we would have finalized our response with regards to the US. And I think that taking into account that we had consciously decided that we are going to wait for this announcement, develop a response, take it to cabinet, make a determination, and then be able to engage with the US. But there are a few things I can say. Notwithstanding the point that I made, which I thought was important to clarify. The first is that in our context, taking an approach that says we will impose reciprocal tariffs, firstly without understanding how the US arrived at 31%, and then begin to respond without engaging with the US, would be counterproductive. It also runs the risk of a race to the bottom, because everybody in the world is making different decisions. There's all sorts of knee-jerk reactions to the announcements made. And I think it's a risky thing to do, to simply decide that, okay, we're now going to impose reciprocal tariffs, and I think it is a race to the bottom. I think it would be ill-considered to simply just make a decision to impose reciprocal tariffs. In any case, our approach has always been, and we've announced this through the president, who has already said to the nation, we are going to engage with the US, we are going to send a delegation of government and other stakeholders, an official delegation to the US, and we are going to engage. Our mandate to approach is to engage, to find solutions, and to resolve problems. And no, we're not going to simply make public pronouncements before processing issues through due process in government. As to the date of the meeting, I suppose that would be, as indicated, determined and announced by the president, because the president had already said at the appropriate time he will send a delegation to the US. So the actual date is ultimately by the direction of the president. What would our message be? Our message, which is the same message we articulated here, is that we think that there are a number of issues that have been impacted by these announcements. The first is the impact on the multilateral trading system, and the need for us to collectively work towards a multilateral trading system that everybody knows the rules to. It can't be that rules are set unilaterally. It must be that nations meet and arrive at a common set of rules and work on the basis of that common set of rules. And that's why the World Trade Organization and related systems is so important. So for us, that's an important message. It is not just in our interest as a smaller country, a developing economy, but it is also in the interest of developed countries to ensure that all of us know the rules against which we're going to play this game called trade. It is in everybody's interest, and it is important that we re-emphasize that message. The second is that, and we had communicated this to the US, is that there's a trade and investment facilitation agreement that South Africa has with the US. And we had started processes last year to revive the TIFA. And we will go back to the US and say we still want to talk around a bilateral engagement on our trade issues with the US. Because there are specific trade issues that happen between the US and South Africa, even outside AGOA. There are still issues that we trade with the US on that are outside AGOA. In fact, the bulk of our trade with the US is outside AGOA. 25% of our trade, give or take, is under AGOA. 75% has been under most favored nations, governed by the World Trade Organization. So we do need to engage with the US around bilateral trade, around our respective investments. We've also significantly invested in the context of us as a country in the US. So we've got significant investments through Sasol, SAPI, and others that have gone into the US markets. We've got companies that have listed on the US Stock Exchange, so in New York. So in reality, we are investors in so much as they're investors in our country. So it is important that we deal with bilateral trade issues. So we will be engaging on those issues. And then there are specific niggling issues. We're having discussions around agricultural products. This would include citrus, it would include pork, it would include poultry that we are engaged. And both ourselves as the DTIC and the Department of Agriculture have actively been engaging with the US, including, we sent a team, Ambassador Lumbi Peter, led by Agriculture in, I think, November, October last year. So we're a team in the US engaging with them around some of the niggling issues that we need to resolve. You would know in the US statement they raised issues around our concerns with regards to removing lymphatic nodes on their pork exports into the country. We've got a scientific reason, they dispute our scientific reason. We need to find each other on those issues. The US thinks that it's an unfair imposition, but our Department of Agriculture has demonstrated why that is an important consideration for our own pork industry as a country. So there are issues that we need to find each other on and resolve that impact particular areas of trade. Poultry in Delaware, other issues that we need to resolve with them. These are issues that we continue to engage on. I suppose that also covers broadly what the strategic engagement platforms would be, because ultimately we do need to go back to Cabinet, get leadership and guidance about the overall strategic approach, but you would understand the issues that we've raised. In fact, I should say, part of the reason, if you like, we had to plead with Minister Lamola to come and join us here, is because the team at DTIC is here working on both our business plan and generally response to trade and investment-related issues. So that's part of the work that we're doing currently as a department. We're cognizant of these developments, and the team is hard at work to finalize those issues. Of course, there are, as I was saying to Minister Lamola, parliamentary deadlines that we need to meet, but there are also specific strategic issues that we're considering with regards to trade, diversification, and approaches, etc. Our engagements with the DRC, firstly, I should say that the Trade Ministers meeting is an AU Trade Ministers meeting. It's a standard meeting that takes place amongst trade ministers. It considers a whole range of issues that trade ministers would be concerned about. There are countries that are not part of AGOA per se, in the trade ministers meeting at the AU. So yes, we will put issues related to AGOA, in particular for those countries that trade under AGOA. The US has confirmed that the AGOA summit is taking place this year. We will be engaging on the basis of continuing to lobby for AGOA to continue. So the reenactment of AGOA for us remains important. Is it that the US would present an approach based on their current trade posture? I suspect they would. And we ourselves as African trade ministers, particularly trading under AGOA, would have to go and engage on the basis of how the US has adapted its trade policies. And we have to adjust our own engagement to acknowledge this. So the US says, well, we're not going to do arrangements where the benefits is on one side. We want reciprocal benefits. So they're going to ask us questions. What is in our interest as we engage on AGOA? And we're going to have to collectively answer those questions as ministers that are responsible for these respective portfolios in our country. So my sense is that when we go to the US as trade ministers later this year, we're going to engage on the basis of a US approach that says we don't want arrangements that only benefit the one side. Of course, we argue that AGOA has not only benefited us, it's also benefited the US, and would be able to demonstrate that, but we're going to go with the understanding that we're in a different environment and we have to engage with the US on the basis of the development of their own policy environment. I leave the difficult ones on tension and so on and so on. Minister Lamola, he understands diplomacy a lot more than us. So I'm sure Minister would help us. I think the point has been made that it is about understanding and appreciating what the posture of the US is. And in many ways, I think for us as South Africans, and one of the things we've been saying over the past few months is that we must guard against South African exceptionalism. It is almost as if when we engage with the US, it is only about South Africa. Over the past few months at least, we know that the US has engaged directly with a number of countries. Then the list has now been a lot more expansive. It's incorporated a whole range of issues, but there are specific countries that the US has essentially said, these are the issues that we are worried about or want to engage on. And our approach has been, well, guard against South African exceptionalism, understand that the US is taking a particular posture with regards to trade, and begin to respond to that. But when you start isolating yourself and thinking, well, it's only me, then you might misdiagnose the issue that you engaged with. And we think that it has been helpful to understand that actually this is about trade policy in the US and the direction they are taking, and we're going to have to respond on the basis of understanding that. I think the issues around reciprocal tariffs has been covered. We have identified, and I'm not sure if the DTG wants to comment on the specific, we know the industries that would be affected. The automotive industry, there's already been a 25% tariff increase. It's across the board to all countries that export automotives into the US. So we know that there's been that approach. We ourselves have said, well, there's of course the risk that you have a situation where it's the smaller exporters that are affected disproportionately into the US. The amount of vehicles that we export into the US is less than 1% of their overall imports of automotives into the US. So to the extent that you take an approach that's across the board, is about protecting the US auto industry, but it's also about, but it also has, I think, the risk of simply just increasing the prices, but impacting negatively on those smaller exporters disproportionately to the bigger exporters into the US market. And I think we're going to have to demonstrate that. Do we intend to target US companies? No. Companies that qualify for the APDP will continue to qualify for the APDP. We do not intend to have any specific targeted tariffs and removal of benefits for US companies. In fact, yesterday I engaged with the US Chamber. It was a pre-scheduled meeting, but we engaged with the US Chamber of Commerce. And I found that the discussions were quite productive. I mean, we have in excess of 600 US companies that are in South Africa. We value them as investors in our country. We continue to engage with US investors to come to our country. So we're not going to wake up one day and say, well, we want to target US companies. It would be counterproductive. It's not in our interest as a country and as an economy to do that. I think I spoke about AGOA. There's the immediate impact, but we're going to engage on AGOA going forward. When I spoke about industries impacted, I spoke about the auto. Agriculture in particular is going to be disproportionately impacted, so we are worried about the agricultural sector. There are specific regions that are more likely to be more disproportionately affected. So if you think about the reliance of Gqeberha, Buffalo City on the automotive industry, and to the extent that depending on which companies are exporting into the US, they are going to be more disproportionately affected. So it's both about sectors, but also specific parts of the country that would be impacted. Major citrus growing regions in the country, the automotive sector in particular, those that export into the US, one of the companies constitutes about 52% of the exports into the US market of South African manufactured product. So it is located in the Eastern Cape, in a city in the Eastern Cape. Therefore, it would be disproportionately affected because there are downstream impacts on that. We're going to have to find ways of mitigating that. We are discussing mechanisms of mitigating the impact on South African industry, but we all appreciate South Africa's budget is also not bottomless. So we're going to have to be creative in the way in which we mitigate the impact on specific industries. I tried to go into a bit more detail one-on-one this time around so that we're able to cover everything. But as I indicated, maybe the DTG would want to add on the specifics on some of the issues. Thank you very much.
DTG, you have some point, man? Okay, please, so that we conclude the DTIC issues, then we'll come to Derek.
Thank you very much. I'll just add a few points from what Minister Dow has indicated. Maybe let me start with the sectors that will be affected. Of course, the agricultural sector, as already mentioned, is another sector that will be affected. A number of manufacturing sectors, such as chemicals, food, beverages, boats and ship industry is going to be affected. Equipment and machinery as well, and the beverages, as I've indicated. So those are our key sectors that will be affected. Of course, there are exemptions that are entailed in Annex 2 that has been circulated, mainly covering pharmaceuticals, also covering the wood articles, critical minerals, energy products, as well as copper. So those are exempted from the implementation. When we look at the autos and auto parts, as Minister Dow has indicated, these are subjected to the 25% under Section 232, as well as iron and steel, as well as aluminium products are also covered under Section 232. So our products are covered under the different dispensations, Section 232, and some are covered under the reciprocity dispensation that the US has just announced. We are, of course, undertaking analysis in terms of the actual impact on each industry. We, in anticipation of this, have already started to consult with a number of sectors, and those consultations are currently underway to assess the impact, but also targeted responses that will assist the industry to mitigate some of the effects. There was a question about the fact that with all of these measures taking place, a number of companies across the world will be looking for alternative markets, and we may see a lot of increase in imports coming into South Africa. We do have instruments that are available to us to deal with surges in imports through the safeguards and the processes that the International Trade Administration Authority implements. And where there are cases of dumping where companies are reducing prices that they charge in their domestic market with a view to gain unfair advantage in terms of our market, we will be able to implement anti-dumping duties in those cases. So there are trade defense instruments that are available under the WTO and under our own law that will allow us to be able to protect our industries. I think those were the points that I wanted to emphasize. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Sophie and Minister Tau that the announced tariffs by the U.S. government represent the U.S. government resetting trade relations with the countries across the globe. It's not about South Africa. Indeed, South Africa, as an affected party to these trade tariffs, has to respond in the manner in which Minister Tau has already outlined, and we outlined earlier on in the main statement. With regards to bilateral relations and the issues related to meetings of the officials, Ambassador Lomo was in the US. She will be able to speak to that, and also the issues of our ambassador in the US, and also other teething issues of policy, BEE, and other matters. We view them as sovereign matters of South Africa, that the government of the Republic of South Africa as a sovereign state has to continue to take decisions on its own independently, and also be informed by its own policies. And the main one, which is the supreme law of the Republic, is the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, which state issues of redress as an important principle in its preamble. This has also been affirmed by the Human Rights Council in Geneva, that South Africa has to deal with issues of redress on the land question or any other issue of redress that the country has to resolve. This is a sovereign matter that South Africa needs to continue to be firm on and be principled on its stance with regards to these matters, because it's a constitutional imperative. And we will see, as we see these as sovereign issues, the government will have to proceed to implement what is a constitutional imperative and what the various laws that have been passed in the government and in the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa as a sovereign state. And we will continue to engage with the US in this regard to state that those that have got concerns with these laws, one of them being the expropriation bill, there are viable mechanisms in the South African robust system, which has got checks and balances. They have taken them to court on the basis of constitutionality, that space needs to be given a chance. It must be given a life of its own. Our courts are known to be independent and impartial, and we believe that that process has to be given that chance. And any other processes that are domestic are happening in the country. And these also include the NHI, the Bella Act, as they've been done through the Constitution. And you are all aware that it's falsehood that there is any ostracization or seizure of land by force by any South African. This, I'm raising them at a bilateral level. We all know that this is not true. Even that Expropriation Act, as it stands now, has got its own checks and balances and processes. It's not some arbitrary process. You may differ with it and all that, but it is there, it's not arbitrary, and there are processes that allows for anyone to challenge it in the courts of the Republic. So these are issues of a sovereign state that have to be handled by the people of South Africa. There are enough avenues for any interest group, even in South Africa, to deal with these matters. And this I'm referring to AfroForum or Solidarity. There are enough platforms here in South Africa to handle this as a sovereign matter of the Republic of South Africa. We continue to engage with the US. As you have heard that our DG and other officials were in New York at the UN, which they also had an opportunity to engage with some of the officials in Washington. And Ambassador Lomo, who was there, will be able to tell you about some of those engagements and what happened there. But the question from Sophie says whether this will be elevated to the political level of ourselves and the president. Yes, at the right time we will elevate them and take them ourselves and also at the level of the president. But the first thing that we will do, and this will be the first step that we will do before appointing an ambassador. As you are aware, the president has already said that he will appoint a special envoys to the US. That is the first thing that will happen. Special envoys or envoy will be appointed to smoothen the process while ourselves will continue to engage at the level of diplomatic channels and platforms. That special envoy will play that role at a high level, and will play the role also of bridging that gap, and that will be done at the right time, as the president always says. And we know that the right time will be very useful for us to be able to do it, so that we can begin to smoothen that relations. Because as the president always says, we always view our relationship with the US as strategic, and we view the US as a strategic partner. Hence, the resetting of those bilateral relations. And with regards to the Congressman Ronnie Jackson's bill, we have seen these bills before from time to time, and some of them come as a normal annual review process by the UN Congress and also the Senate. Some are bipartisan. We have seen them before, and we, even at that level, one of the issues we'll continue to engage with the US is that we do think that there may be a need for some level of annual engagements at the Congress or Senate level between us and the US Congress and Senate, and also at the state level, to clarify from time to time some of these issues. Because as you read the bill, it also has some falsehoods and characterization itself, and those have to be cleared from time to time. And one of those is the fact that we are leaning towards a particular direction. South Africa has always maintained its non-alignment posture. We engage with all countries of the world in a non-aligned posture. As a developing and an emerging economy, it is in our interest to be able to engage with everyone. China, Russia, everyone in the world. And we have been saying this has always foregrounded our foreign policy. And it is in this context that we engage with Iran, with Russia, with China, with everyone across the globe. And we continue to clarify the misconceptions and the propaganda out there that somewhere, somehow, we were funded or forced to go to the ICJ by Iran. It is public knowledge. It's in our reports that we pay for the legal fees of the lawyers at the ICJ. It's the South African government. But despite this, propaganda continues to rise across and so from time to time. But when you go and look at our books, we pay. It's public knowledge. You can. It's in the reports. It's in the AGs. It's in our annual reports. It's public knowledge. But we will not get tired. We'll continue to clarify that the South African government continues to pay the bill. So it's not true that we were beholden to Iran to go to the ICJ. It was a matter of principle that the South African government took a decision on its own, in line with its constitution, in line with the Genocide Convention that is domesticated in our courts, to go to the International Court of Justice. So no one put a gun on our heads, or no one paid for us to go to the ICJ. It's a lie. It's untrue. It's propaganda. I've also seen the letter that was said to have also been sent to the upcoming or to the incoming ambassador with regards to the same matter, that we were somehow aware of the 7 October planning or incident. I want to state again categorically on behalf of the South African government that we were not aware, neither was any DERCO official, as it is alleged in that letter. There was no DERCO official who was aware of this planned attack on October 7. It is also another untruth that is being peddled to malign the good character of South Africa's human rights record as a defender of human rights across the globe. So it is not true. It's a lie. It's propaganda. It's aimed to continue to malign our role. But we will continue to stand firm and clarify any misconception in this regard. With regards to our posture in the various multilateral platforms, we will continue to advocate what is in the Constitution, is in the National Development Plan, it's in our national interest document. It's also reinforced by the statement of intent with the human rights outlook, North and South engagement, North and North engagements and cooperation. So that is what we'll continue to advocate for, and also to affirm the role of multilateral platform as the UN being the supreme multilateral platform in global in geopolitics. With South Sudan, indeed, Sophie, it's an issue that we are still considering. We have also noted that the President of Kenya has sent a special envoy on behalf of IGAD to mediate, to assess the situation, which we also have to look into, assess. And also the AU itself, the AU Peace and Security Council, has also sent the panel of the wise to go into South Sudan. So we are also there as the peace guarantor. We are also assessing whether we should give that process a space and a life of its own before we also come in and so forth. So we are continuing to assess the situation, and we continue to call on all the parties to respect the terms of the revitalized peace agreement and comply with its obligations. I think I have answered most of the questions that related to me. I will request that Ambassador Lomo respond to the meetings in Washington and any other issue that she thinks may be necessary. And the one related to Thailand and Myanmar, I will request our DDG, Clayson Minyela, to respond to, as he works with this on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
I hope my voice is going to carry me through. We had a meeting with different houses in Washington as part of our job. The first one is that we started this engagement about 4 years ago, which is regular, because there was an understanding that we need to talk more and explain more our positions more to each other, so that when we take a particular position, we're all clear about, if it's from US side, why is South Africa taking a particular position on anything. So we agreed that we will meet regularly with the Congressional House and also the senators. We also meet when we were there with the State Department, which is like your foreign ministry, also with business councils and chambers. We also meet with NGOs and think tanks. This time around, as we all know, it's a new administration. We have not met before, but more than anything else, as a minister has explained, there's been a lot of misinformation. And on the agenda in most of the meetings that were attended, the issues of explaining what the expropriation bill is about and whether it's against Afrikaners. The second issue which was raised all the time is whether the farm killings are continuing and what is government doing about it. The other one was BEE, when you've got investors interested in our economy and how it works, and whether there's what we call equity equivalent if it's not BEE shares immediately in that company. And also, generally, also our relations with Israel. So the discussions were quite cordial, were very open. They were able to ask questions very cordially. And we'll also ask the questions, they'll ask questions, and we'll engage. And it was quite an honest discussion as well, where they clarified themselves in terms of why they take particular stance or posture on different things. And of course, business chambers confirmed their interest in investing in South Africa, and also the importance of AGOA to them. And they indicated their anxiety if AGOA would stop, because they also benefit, perhaps more so, when they invest in South Africa, but not only in South Africa, but also in the whole of the continent. I think I've covered all what has been asked, but it was really the kind of a discussion that then it helps to inform our principals in terms of where the understanding is or where there could have been a misunderstanding, so that then the special envoys and our ministers, when they engage at their level, those issues would have been already started being addressed at our level. Thank you.
Is it still morning? Was it afternoon now? Afternoon. This is why you're all quiet. The question that was asked was on the natural disaster, earthquake in Myanmar and Thailand. The South African government issued a statement sending a message of condolences to the two countries. There were 11 South Africans that we were aware of. They are all safe and accounted for. The South African government, through the diplomatic mission in Thailand, is rendering consular assistance to them. We're in touch with their families and loved ones here at home. We've just received unfortunate news today, though, that one of the bodies that was retrieved from the rubble in Myanmar is that of a South African teacher who was there to teach English. The family has been informed. We are in touch with them and rendering consular assistance to them, and we will be working with them with regards to what happens here going forward. So that's why the matters are those that are in the 11 number that we included in the statement are safe and accounted for. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for a great conversation. And thank you to our principals for availing themselves to give you the reflections on behalf of our country. This marks the closure of our press conference. Thank you very much. Have a good Friday. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Continue with the APP.
Oh, just to announce now, this room is going to be used out being a bully to ask back in a manner that is speedily.